So after milling up all of my lumber, I started this build by gluing up the tabletop, and that's what you can see me doing here with all these walnut boards. And once the top had dried, I cut it to its final width using my track saw. And then it was time for a little bit of cleanup, and I used primarily my number 5 jack plane and my block plane for this. Pretty much here I'm just trying to even up the glue lines because I didn't use anything for alignment, and take down any high spots, things like that. Next, it's time to work on the breadboard ends, and these are going to actually pull out and accept a leaf on each end of the table. So I'm using my domino here to make oversized mortises in the end of the table. And the mortises and the breadboard ends are on the tight setting. And then it's time to glue in all of the tenons. I also did this on the leaves as well. Made the oversized mortises and glued in the tenons. The client wanted this to be sort of a rustic type table, so I used this particular walnut for it specifically because it's a little bit punky and I've required some stabilization with the epoxy. So once the epoxy had cured, I ran those pieces back through my planer to clean them all up. Then it was time to turn the legs, and this is a lot of fun. I don't get to turn very often, and when I do, I really enjoy it. So here, with the blank round, I can go ahead and start laying out the transitions. And I do this with the parting tool and my calipers, and I just cut with the parting tool down to the depth that I need, and once that's done, I'll go ahead and start shaping the leg. For the shaping, I mostly used a roughing gouge and a spindle gouge. In the past, I've always sort of been a carbide lathe tool guy, but I'm really liking getting into the traditional tools. And if there's anyone out there who hasn't used the traditional tools or is sort of afraid of them like I was, give it a shot. They're actually a lot of fun. And I went back to my carbide finisher here just to smooth everything out, and then of course you have to sand everything. So I sanded up to 220 and called it done. Next I started working on the leg assemblies, and this is what you would I guess call the foot of the assembly, and I decided to add some decorative curves and roundovers to the pieces here just to add a little bit to it. So I rounded that over, and here I'm going to glue the foot onto the base of the leg assembly and set those aside to dry. While those dried, I decided to trim the leaves and the breadboard ends to match the width of the table. And while I was at it, I decided to just do some final finessing of the joints where the leaves meet the table and where the breadboard ends meet the leaves, just to clean things up there a little bit and make it all flow real nice. Next, I cut out this notch, or I guess really wide dado, to accept the stretcher that's going to go between the leg assemblies. And I like to do this by cutting out the extreme sides first, and then removing all the waste in the middle, and then sneaking up on my fit. You can see here it doesn't quite fit in there, so I'm going to take off just a hair more, and we'll see that it drops right in. And so with that done, it's time to glue up each leg assembly. And to do this, I'm just using my domino and the floating tenons. And so with that end in the clamps, I can go ahead and attach the base plate to the bottom of the turned legs. And I decided to do this with glue and screws. It just seemed an easier way to align everything that way as opposed to using dominoes. Next I started to work on the rail system for the extending part of the table. And here I'm cutting out the, I guess, rail guides you could call them. The rail itself is going to have two tongues on it, one on each side, that are going to ride in this groove. So essentially it's just a tongue and groove system that allows the table to extend. And here I'm using my shoulder plane to clean up the tongues on each rail itself to get a really nice snug fit on the guides, but not so snug that it can't be slid in and out. That would kind of defeat the purpose. So here I'm attaching the rail system to the underside of the table, and this is one of those guide blocks with the groove in it. And there is the rail, and I'm using a folded up sheet of paper to give me a little bit of space between the rail and the guide block, just to help reduce friction and allow for any sort of expansion that might happen. And there is the guide block for the other side of the rail. These are just temporarily attached. I'm just making sure that everything works. Once I'm sure that everything works, I'll go ahead and glue these pieces in place. And so here you can kind of see how the slides work inside of the guide blocks. Things are a little tight right now, but some wax on those slides will make everything run nice and smooth. And so next I took everything back apart and added glue in addition to the screws. And then it's time to glue up the rest of the base. So here I'm basically just gluing the two long stretchers in to connect the two separate leg assemblies. And next it's time to glue in the stretcher. And now we can attach the top. And for this I'm using some table buttons that I made. Real simple, they just fit into slots in the aprons and they allow the table to expand and contract. And here's a view of the leaves going into the table, so you can see the tenons going into the oversized mortises and the tenons on the breadboard end going into the leaf. With all the building done and everything working the way it should, it's time for finish. And this finish is pretty simple, it's just shellac. And the very last thing I have to do before I can call this table done is wax the rails. Smooth as silk. So I want to say thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Alright guys, go build something.